Welcome to this podcast called Grief Rewritten, where we explore the many faces of loss. Grief isn't just about death, it's about change, growth, strength, resilience, and the stories that shape us. Each episode we listen to voices that often go unheard, raw, real testimonies from people who have grieved jobs, relationships, identity, health, and more. For the next little while, we'll endeavour to enter a space to honour the quiet resilience behind different kinds of grief and goodbyes. My special guest today is Jill Crookes, who is the founder of Wombat's Wish. Thank you, Jill, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Jill is the founder, as I said, of Wombat's Wish, an organisation that supports families, particularly children who have bereaved parents, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I have personal experience with this in having attended a camp back in 2011 when my husband died and I took my son Owen. And Jill, from then on, I think we'd had a few conversations since then, and I came back and did some music therapy 1 year at one of the camps, but the camp at the time was a real godsend and a real, I think it was about 5 months after Richard had passed, and still in the very early stages of grief. So it was really a comfort to me to be able to meet people that were going through a similar thing, that I wasn't alone, even though I felt alone. There were others that were going through that, and that was the beauty of what I found, and forming friendships and relationships there. Jill, would you like to start by just telling us a little bit about why you started Wombat's Wish?
Yes, I've been a working psychologist for 50 years now, but my husband died in 1991 of a massive heart attack. Our children were 10 and 8, and I've been working as a psychologist for a good while then, but as it would happen, I worked in Geelong, and was then a small country town, really, probably still is. But when I finally went back to work, I became, unbeknownst to me, but the word had gone around Geelong, of course, and the small community, and I suddenly was designated the widow's expert and the grieving children expert, which I hadn't sort of thought about because 3 months in, I was still pretty shell-shocked. And I did have to think, do I want to do this? And I'd already had an interest prior to my husband dying in death, dying and bereavement and chronic illness and so forth. And the experiences that my children were having at school were varied from excellent teachers and supportive classmates to people who were simply terrified of them. And so I was already working with the schools, if you like, to sort of help them ease the way for my children. And then I made a decision, well, yes, I'll obviously need good supervision, because I don't want to get confused between my situation and the professional situation. But it really just kind of grew out, naturally became a thing. And so, watching my children attempt to come to terms with the shattering of their lives really moved on to how to help other children with this experience. Yeah.
So were you in those first initial stages, were you wanting to gather some people around you that had similar experiences, or colleagues being in the mental health field? Well, how
I got the idea of Wombat's Wish was kind of just serendipitous, really. My daughter was doing a gap year in London at the end of high school or secondary school, and I got a message from the head of she was working in a school, the head of the boarding house where she's working, saying that Kate was getting very homesick because it was getting cold and dark in London, and she wanted to sort of finish her placement early. And the teacher said, no, she's staying, but can you come over? I said, okay. She said, we'll feed you, we'll sleep you in the boarding house, just find your airfare. I thought, righto, I'm off. Yeah. And being a psychologist in private practice, I looked around for a conference so I could have a tax-deductible airfare. And lo and behold, the Child Bereavement Network was having their annual conference at the same time. So I trundled along, and the first speaker was Julie Stokes, who founded Winston's Wish. And she came up and said what she does, and we take children into the wilderness, well, English wilderness, and this is what we do. And I went, oh, my goodness, wow, that's stunning. And so I came back to Australia and started talking about this wonderful program, and a funeral director who I knew in Geelong through our bereavement network group, she said to me one day, when are you going to stop talking about this and do it? And I said, well, I've looked at all the forms to establish a charity, and I said, the deductible gift recipient form, I get to question 3 and I don't really know what it means. She said, I'll find someone to do that. And I said, great. So I set up, I could do the therapeutic side, the professional side. So away I went. And having been a psychologist and supervised and mentored many shall we say, junior psychologist, working up to full registration. I rang them all up and said, you owe me. I didn't say that, of course. I said, come on board. So I gathered together, a group of psychologists and social workers whom I all knew and who I knew would understand the concept of where I was coming from, and away we went.
Great. So what was it about Winston's Wish that, felt like this could be something that could be replicated, down here?
Well, certainly where I live here in the beautiful surf coast, the wilderness, lots of lovely places to have bush camps, really. It didn't really matter where it happened. It was the program. Julie Stokes and Diana Crosley founded Winston's Wish on a Churchill Fellowship. They went all around the world, and it was just the program. It resonated about children being allowed to play, explore, to be heard, to be understood, and I think you nailed it, to be with people who are having the same experience. Whilst we put a lot of time, energy and effort into devising the curriculum, if you like, for Wombat's Wish, I often say you could just put all the kids together in a room and do the first exercise, which is, hello, I'm Charlie, my dad died, or whatever. And that's your job's not quite done, but the isolation goes.
Yes.
And that's, of course, incredibly empowering, especially when your world's been shattered.
And often I know that I felt in those first few months that there was a sense of, I was going through this was my reality, but to hear other people and other parents that had, going through it at the same time, like you said, was extremely comforting. And even though circumstances were different, I remember there were parents on our camp that had lost their partners through suicide as well as terminal illness or accident, sudden accident. There was almost a familiarity about, even though I didn't know these people and got to know them obviously over the 2 days, but the minute we started talking about our shared experiences, there was something, there was a sense of belonging, because there was a commonality in what we were here for, even though none of us would have wished to have met under these circumstances, of course. I suddenly felt comforted by that in my grief. Is that the type of...
Yes, we have many, as you've articulated, many people come with many different causes of death, but the common experience of your whole world being shattered completely, your future, your assumptions about the world, and particularly for children, their sense of safety and trust in the world. Perhaps we adults are a little more secured against that, I suppose, but I don't know. Sometimes you just feel like you're a child again yourself. Your whole world is gone. So yes, everyone's experiencing the same. It's not the same, but they're very, very similar. Psychological process, I suppose. I don't want to and emotional processes. You can feel in your gut that you get it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here nodding at each other, but that's what, as you know, having been in the parents group, that's what's going all the time. Everyone's head is nodding as each person is talking about what's happened to them.
That's it, absolutely. And you, it was a really good point in that I understood and, could gauge where I was at and how I was going emotionally, but I had no idea how my son was going. He was 5 at the time, and I'd studied early childhood, and I understood developmental theories, but it's like, are you really okay? What's going on in that little head of yours? And children, as we know, express emotions differently. They sense emotion in the house, even if he wasn't privy to conversations we were having after Richard died. Sensing those emotions in the house. Father's Day at school, one of my first thoughts I remember was like, what are we going to do about Father's Day at school, So it was all about being able to share and talk about those experiences with other parents that were facing the same reality in navigating, like you said, life, the new normal.
Yeah, and listening to other parents, and sometimes, the really creative ways they've devised, if you like, to deal with things like Father's Day, Mother's Day, anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, and so on. And sometimes you've thought of those, and other times you think, oh, what a great idea. I'd never have thought of that. So there's that whole support. Yeah. And what's going on in their heads, of course, unfortunately, as we get older, we kind of forget what was going on in our heads as we were children. But that's the purpose of Wombat's Wish, is to allow children to explore and express through many different mediums, through music and play and writing and so on and so on. We provide as many outlets as we can do, because, as we know, every child is different. Even in our own children, the siblings are all different. So how we allow children to access their thoughts and feelings as best we can, and to support them and encourage them and allow them to feel sorrow.
Yeah, yes. That brings me, beautifully to my next point in that, as I mentioned, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is we don't talk about grief as a society, but for children, they're grieving little things, every day. It doesn't have to be the loss of a parent, whether it's, separation or divorce or, estrangement from, siblings or step-siblings or lots of other things, grieving, moving house, grieving, changing schools, all those different things. And I think it was really good that it opened up Owen's eyes to that, even though concentration was around losing a parent, that these kids, were grieving like him, but were grieving differently. Some of them didn't want to open up at the start. Owen was very quiet, so I'm not sure, he was probably quiet at the start and then opened up towards the end. But, so many creative ways to be able to express, their thoughts. And, we know that children internalise, those feelings so much as adults do, but it was a chance to be able to express those in, beautifully creative ways and hear from other kids that they might have been feeling the same thing, but they, expressed it differently. They might talk about it a lot, they might not talk about it at all. Have you found that with the, with the feedback and things from the camps as they evolved about, how the children, felt being able to express that freely?
Yeah, we had give the children and the parents a little feedback sheet and what was your favourite activity, and that varies. Most people we have a candlelight ceremony where the children's very evocative, and the children are encouraged to remember, light a candle, and we deliberately make it as emotionally evocative as we can. And it can be quite distressing, if you don't know what we're doing and why we're doing it. But you would think that the kids wouldn't write down that was their favourite activity. You'd think they'd put the flying fox or the eating the muffins or whatever. But they do write the candlelight ceremony. Of course, they do write the flying fox and everything else. But, But I think we also asked them what was their least favourite, and possibly the candlelight ceremony has been put down. I haven't looked at the feedback sheets for a while, but not often, not as often as you would expect. They do treasure, I guess, or relish or enjoy, not even enjoy, maybe they don't enjoy the candlelight ceremony, but they certainly value being able to be heard, listened to and express what's going on for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, there's that permission to be allowed to grieve. You know, I think if they don't see mum or dad or auntie or, you know, someone else doing it, that grief doesn't necessarily mean they're sad all the time, or that, you know, mum or dad, you know, is crying a lot. It's like they might not have even cried themselves, but they're just allowed to be whatever they are and feel whatever they want to in that moment, you know, whether it's around the framework of a candlelight ceremony or, something else, making the beautiful little jars with the coloured sand. I remember he did, but as adults too, I think we as society, we don't allow ourselves to grieve. And I'm not sure, it's a funny anomaly because we all are going to go through grief at some stage, you know, death and taxes, that's the certainty, but we don't allow one another to grieve, or maybe we have a perception of how much time we're allowed to grieve, or, you know, how that is. What do you...
I think we've become a death-denying society. That's often you hear that amongst people, experts, if you like, in the field. And that's, I think, evolved from different cultural and societal reasons. We've medicalised, you know, people go into hospitals, they don't die at home. The front room in everyone's house used to be for laying out of bodies, and the vicar would come and so forth, and they'd be open coffins. And so we've hidden it away for all sorts of, as I say, cultural and societal reasons, and perhaps in the very mistaken belief that would help. But in fact, it's deeply mistaken. And it's... Yes, as I say, it's complex as to why that's happened, but it's a mistake. We need... It's just the most delightful irony. We won't talk about death, but it's the one thing we're all going to do, and we're going to do it perfectly well. Yeah,
exactly. And I would have thought, you know, perhaps after the COVID and the pandemic, you know, where we did go through a lot of grief in lots of different ways, and it was a worldwide thing, that we might be a little bit more comfortable about talking about it. But I think... You know, it brings me to another point in that I think one of the things that I struggled with when I was a widow was that dealing with other people's grief.
Yes.
Or not, I was comfortable in my own way of how I was dealing with it, but dealing with other people who didn't necessarily know how to deal with grief or talk what to say to me. You know?
Oh, yes. There's those of us who've been in the widow camp and, are always in it, really, even if we remarry or repartner. I mean, we could all write a book or fill a book, I reckon, with all the amazingly inept, shall we say, things that people have said. And I remember a psychologist friend of mine had a stillborn child about 8 years before my husband died, before Paul died, and was talking to her, and she was the first person who alerted me, because I must have said, I can't believe what someone said to me. And she said, Jill, you need to get used to this, because, and if you stay, if you hold on to it, you won't get, you won't move through, if you like. I can't remember exact words, but she said, because we can all fill a book.
And I think one of the reasons, like I said, why I wanted to start this was just to start that conversation and start that dialogue around, different forms of grief. And I think perhaps as, humanity, we don't like to sit with the uncomfortable. I know now that I'm a counsellor and I have learnt to do that through lived experience, but also in my training. But for a lot of us, we don't like to sit with comfortable, and I think grief,
we've learnt to sanitize our emotional lives. We talk about mental health rather than emotional expression and appropriateness. If someone dies or some other form of loss happens, you're meant to hurt. You're not meant to do it alone or unsupported. but it's part of life. And I think the positive psychology movement, as good as it is, has a little bit of toxicity attached to it because, be brave, be strong, be resilient, and so on. Well, actually, no, I don't want to today, and I don't think I can.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be really sad, miserable, hurt, etc. today. Yeah.
I wear a lanyard at work and it says it's okay not to be okay. And
absolutely, yeah.
I think we're still learning that as a society.
Yeah, we're kind of, we've got very much into the power on, move on, keep achieving, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And so on, yeah.
Yeah. How do you think your two children, given that they experience a loss of their dad from an early age, what do you think how they are now or what their views are around grief and loss now?
I don't actually have a sort of sit-down discussion with them about that. I watch them parent their own children, and my daughter, where her daughters go to school, a parent died very suddenly, and my daughter said, "Mum, you need to come and talk to the school. They've got, they don't know what to do. They're not getting it right." So, and my son, he's a bit sort of less. Well, my daughter's also a psychologist, a research psychologist. My son doesn't sort of overtly say as much, but as I say, I watch him parent his own children, and you can see with his delightful wife, you can see how they validate the children's emotions if they're sad or angry. My grandson plays footy. He played this morning and they got absolutely hammered. And I was looking after the other one and they came home and I said, "Oh, match report." And my daughter-in-law said, "No, just let's let him feel the feelings for the moment and let him, have the disappointment. It's just got to keep going. It's just got to play itself out." And I thought, yep, it does. Yeah.
How we talked about the children and their experiences at the camp. How do you involve, what are some other things that you involve the surviving parent apart from the camps? There are other things as well. How is that important in the life of the organisation?
Well, as you know, and we've alluded to, we have a program for parents and primary carers at the camp. And the research is in the most important way to care for a grieving child is to care for the surviving parent or primary carer. And I always say the most important work happens at the parents' camp. The best fun perhaps happens at the children's camp. But ongoing support, there's lots of Wombat Swish now have lots of programs, individual counselling. I think I've forgotten what they're called, but they're like Zoom catch-ups for parents. And people, of course, can return to camp. Families can return to camp. So there's lots of course, when we started, there was just the camps because we didn't have any money or any resources. But now things are pretty much any way that people feel they can, that's comfortable for them to get support. Of course, not everyone wants to go to camps and it's not appropriate. Most people, we don't like individual counselling. I certainly try to avoid the term individual therapy because I'm not sure too many grieving situations require therapy as such. But there's a team now there's a team of people who are all paid and if people want to know what Wombat Swish does, jump on wombatswish.org.au and all the programs and things are there.
Yeah, great. And certainly, like I said, through lived experience, it was a lifesaver and a godsend for me. And I know I have a group that I started off called Lighthouse Friends for widows with young children, and a few of them have been on the camps and I've really enjoyed them and got a lot out of them as well. And I think that brings home that point about just shared experience about living through something none of us want to experience but will inevitably do so, but doing it with other people, like you said, not alone and with support can make a world of difference. Is there something that you wish could tell every adult that has a grieving child, what are some of those things we touched on before, of some of the things that the awkwardness around not knowing what to say? But if you could say something to adults about, their child going through a loss, what are some things that you've learnt?
Children require honesty, no glossing over. If a parent has died, a parent has died. They haven't passed over or passed on. They may well have, but that, according to your religious beliefs, but that implies some sort of they may come back, or I can talk to them or something. It's really important for children to understand that the parents or the sibling's body has died. Yes. It has stopped working, and they cannot talk to you, and they will not talk to you ever again. And as awful and gut-wrenching as that is, children need the truth, because as you kind of said before, children can pick up on the vibes, if you like, in the house. I always say they smell what's going on. And they know when they're not being told the full truth. Yeah. And that, of course, their trust in the world has already gone. You must not add to it. I know people, parents and other people mean well, because your heart's breaking for yourself, but it's breaking even more for your children. And so you kind of want to coddle them and protect them, and it's just some extent, of course, you do all that. But keeping the truth from them is not protecting them. It's confusing them. So try to do your best to be as open, as honest, and also talking of trust the kids will be able to, with your support and the support of lots of other people, hopefully, they will be able to wend their way through this. Yeah. They will that's a new world. They've got to find a new way of living and being and understanding and being them and understanding themselves. Yeah. But they can and will. Kids are pretty remarkable.
Yeah, they are. They're quite resilient in circumstances. Certainly in this case, I know that my two children have been quite resilient, but they're also, I like the term, malleable. They're also quite malleable in that even though they might not start off with resilience, or they'll learn, to grow into, I think, that new normal in different ways and in different times. We can mould them and shape them depending on your experience and what you're going through. But I think it's okay to see. I was very conscious of letting my two children see me cry, that I didn't just cry at night time away from them, that I was, visibly upset at times. Sometimes there were days where there was a lot of tears. Sometimes there wasn't. But I know that they were watching, especially Owen, who was older. Ayla was 1.5, but Owen would be watching to see how I was. The predictor for the day was, what does Mum look like when in the morning? Is she going to be okay? But I always wanted to let them know that I will be sad, and that I was sad, I was grieving, and that means for me, I think I joke around, my superpower is crying. So I was quite comfortable in that. But I know for some families and some parents that, they don't want to, they want to protect their child and not have them see them upset. What are your thoughts?
Whilst that's understandable, it's not kind of useful. Just something you've just said reminded me, you asked me about my children, and the one thing, of course they do, as we're saying, they watch you like a hawk, but my son still does that, I just realised. That's the answer to my question. Yeah. He works here. His work from home office is downstairs, so he's here a lot. And I can be, just kind of off with the fairies or thinking about something, and you'll go, what? And I go, oh, it's okay, I'm okay. So he still watches me, which is, I don't think, perhaps something that would have happened otherwise. If his father had lived and his father was still here, he wouldn't need to do that. Yeah. His father would do that.
Yes, that's very interesting. I think my son is similar in that he does watches me when things, the job that I do, and if I come home and I've had a particularly hard day, and or I'll be watching a show and, it's made me teary, and he'll come in and he'll just sort of read the room, and it's like, oh, okay, but I think in a lot of ways that has made and will make him, more compassionate soul
Yes.
in terms of understanding, grief, and perhaps, God forbid that, he would have to experience that himself. But there will be times when, he will lose friends. He will lose, we're in the process of losing grandparents at the moment, his grandparents. And but I hopefully through this experience he can recall some of those feelings that he felt, that he, from watching me, as good or bad a job as I had done as a single parent, that maybe now, in his adulthood, that he might just have a little bit more, have that emotional vocab, be able to, recall some of those memories back, and more compassionate. Grieving looks different to him.
Yeah, again, that's reminded me of something. My mum and dad died, mum about 8 years ago and dad about 6 years before that. And he was stunning in his care of them as they were dying, but also of me.
Yeah.
Because I was the primary one. I have two brothers, but they are not particularly, shall we say, emotionally capable in that situation. So it kind of fell to me. And he was just, I was really just so proud and supported by him, like it was just wonderful.
That's great. That's great. And they are very different. I think as my daughter has grown up, she was only 1.5 at the time, so she really just has sort of images and photos. But I think she's through, the anniversaries. We've recently just been through the 15-year since he died, and just talking with them about it, and showing photos and things like that. She too will have a different experience to Owen, but I think even though she was little, she will still, I think just from the talks, recently, old enough to sort of understand, understands the concepts around death and dying, that it's permanent. Like you said, I think it's a good point that you brought up about, I always use the term died. I think I learnt that from the camp actually, whereas, passed away, passed on is very common in society. But,
it's a euphemism, a platitude. It's kinder, but not kinder.
Yeah. Interesting. One last question before we finish. What do you think your ideas around grief and dying and losing a partner in society now, like as we touched on, it's not a common thing to talk about, but if there was a message to bring to people about, that maybe are going through this at the moment as they're listening to this, or, the parents that are, future parents of going on those camps, what can we say that perhaps can just make it a little bit easier in terms of losing a partner, close loved one, in terms of, just opening up that conversation to grief?
Gosh, that's a hard question to answer, because as we've already said, one size doesn't fit all. I think I would say, as tough as it is, reach out. It's such a hard thing to do. Easy to say, and when your whole world's shattered and you don't know which way is up, down, or whether you should be having breakfast or dinner, reaching out seems like so logical and easy, and we talk about it, but tough as it is, reach out, and organisations like Wombat Swish and your organisation Lighthouse Friends, they will get you. They will know what you're talking about, and that will be the best thing you can do for yourself, as tough as it is. Because I think we're also, we're encouraged to see reaching out as helplessness and hopelessness and our failure even. I should be able to do this. I should be able to do this. Well, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's never been a thing that people do alone. Once upon a once, as you know, widows wore what were called widows' weeds, widows' garments. And, we don't do that anymore, and there's arguments for and against, but at least widows are identified. And in certain societies, they were revered and allowed, the lady in black went to the front of the queue, as it were. And so you weren't hidden away, and you didn't have to keep your pain and hurt at home. Could be public. So, there's still people out there who see you and hear you and feel you and know you. Unfortunately, we can't identify you these days because you're not wearing black from head to toe.
Yeah. Did you find it hard to ask for help, given that you were a psychologist and you were aware of and being in that space of being out and studying death and dying? Did you find it hard to ask for help?
No, I didn't. I, at the time, as I say, worked in Geelong, and we had I had a wonderful group of friends who were psychologists, and people said, "Oh, did you get therapy or get help?" I said, "No, I had a lot of lunches," and I did.
Yes.
And I would ring my mates up, and they would ring me up. And one of them, I still remember, she said, "We haven't had lunch for 3 months.
Yeah.
I'm free next Wednesday. We're having lunch." Nice. She was particularly assertive and wonderful. So no, I didn't. I mean, I would be. I hope I wouldn't have, and I didn't, but it would be kind of interesting if I didn't, knowing that, I create, hopefully, in my consulting room, a safe place and allow people to feel whatever they need to feel.
Actually, that's an interesting point you brought up about your friend colleague who just, having lunch. I think one of the toughest things that I realised was that decision fatigue, I guess, around there were so many decisions that I had to make after Richard died, and I was it, so there was no one else to ask. I had family around and friends, of course, but sometimes people would say, "What can I do to help?" And it's like, that's just one more decision that I don't have the answer to. I don't know. And I had a couple of close friends that would just come around and do the laundry, that would just, tidy up the house, clean the bathroom, make something, because I just during that time in the grief bubble, in the first 12 months or maybe more, just making decisions was
and let me know
difficult.
Let me know if I can do anything. You want me to be assertive? You want me to think? You want me able to construct a sentence, and then think about, I've had the need. The bathroom needs cleaning. Now, who said they'd help me? Oh, no one. Oh, well, I'll just ring, Mary or whoever. No, just do stuff. And you can't offend and you won't offend. I never wanted to see another chocolate cake, I have to say, for quite some time because of the children's age. And people meant well and bless their cotton socks. Yes. But chocolate cake is not the food that children, they kind of think they want it. But, people who made a lasagna or, and sometimes they'll just find food on the doorstep. Yes. And I had no idea where it came from. That sort of thing. And it doesn't matter if, the lasagna can go in the freezer if you're sick of lasagna. I'm not sure I'd ever get sick of lasagna. But so don't say to someone, just let me know.
Great point. Yes. And like I said, just not knowing, it took me, 10, 20, sometimes half an hour to psych myself to get out of bed and am I going to have a shower today, let alone an open question of how can I help? So, Well, thank you very much, Jill, for your wisdom, for your insight, for your awareness around this, and for starting such a wonderful organisation all those years ago. Like Jill said, if you want some more information, you can go to wombatswish.org.au.
Correct.
Yeah, it's also on Facebook as well, and other media platforms, I'm sure. But please reach out, if this is something that you're interested in, and camps every year and different things, as Jill has said. Thank you very much, Jill, for sharing your time, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back with another episode in upcoming weeks. But thank you very much for sharing your time and your wisdom around this.
Thank you for having me.